I have never liked the sound of a doorbell, not in all my 67 years, but I hate it most of all at the end of a long, draining day. After hours of meetings, phone calls, endless decisions, and the heavy quiet of driving back to an empty house, the only thing I ever want is silence and maybe a generous glass of dry red wine. That evening was no different. I had just slipped off my shoes, already reaching for the bottle on the counter, when the bell rang shrill, uninvited, and sharp enough to split the calm I'd been craving. Standing there on the porch was a courier, a young man with a half-smile that suggested he had delivered too many packages to too many tired faces. In his hand was an envelope decorated with gaudy sequins that glittered under the porch light, a ridiculous sparkle for a tired evening. Even before he opened his mouth, the faint fragrance of Naomi's perfume drifted toward me, sweet, heavy, unmistakably hers. "Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked politely, holding out the envelope. "There's a delivery for you." I didn't bother with pleasantries. I nodded once, took the envelope from his hand, and closed the door before he had the chance to add a single extra word. I've never had much patience for idle chatter, not with strangers at my door and not with neighbors either. Merle Whitmore, 67 years old, does not enjoy small talk and never has. Nor do I care for parties, reunions, or family gatherings. That stretched long into the night. The envelope was signed in Naomi's tidy, looping handwriting. "Dear Mom," it began, in her old-fashioned cursive that still looked like it had been practiced on school worksheets. Inside, a card bloomed with bright painted flowers and embossed gold edges. The message was simple: "You are invited to my 39th birthday celebration." I laughed, a short, dry laugh that didn't quite reach my chest. Naomi had been celebrating her 39th birthday for the past 3 years. Each year she declared it with the same ceremony, as though time could be bent backwards by sheer insistence. I tossed the card onto the kitchen table and poured myself a heavy glass of wine. The house around me was quiet. Too quiet. My home sat on the outskirts of Connellsville, a little too large for one woman living alone, but I had never been able to give up the space. I liked the way it held me, the way it let me breathe without anyone hovering. After Henry died, Naomi tried to convince me to move into something smaller. "Too many memories in that place, Mom," she said, urging me to sell, but I didn't stay for the memories, not entirely. I stayed because here, in these walls and this garden, I could simply be myself. From the kitchen window, I could see the backyard with its row of tall oak trees. Henry had planted them himself 40 years ago when we first bought the house. "They'll outlive us all," he'd said proudly, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. And he was right. At least for him. Henry's heart gave out 12 years ago. Sudden and cruel. A heart attack that left no time for goodbyes. I was at work when the hospital called, standing in a harder at a construction site where the foundation of a new shopping center was being poured. By the time I picked up the phone, Henry was already gone. Naomi has never forgiven me for that. At his funeral, she spat her grief at me like a weapon. Even in Dad's last moments, "You were thinking about your goddamn job." I didn't tell her that Henry was already dead before she ever dialed my number. I didn't explain that I had 300 workers waiting for my instructions and that leaving in the middle would have collapsed the project. And I didn't say that Henry would have understood, because he always had. But Naomi never wanted explanations. She wanted someone to blame, and I was convenient. To her, I was the mother who chose concrete over family, deadlines over love. Took another sip of wine, and let my eyes fall to the kitchen calendar. Naomi's birthday was marked neatly in blue pen a week away. I sat back and wondered, as I always did, if I should make an excuse not to go. A board meeting, a site inspection, an emergency contract. Over the years, I'd built a library of reasons, each one convincing enough to avoid the unbearable strain of family gatherings. Picked up my phone and scrolled through Naomi's most recent messages. Mum, don't forget Ella's graduation is next month. Mum, you promised Thanksgiving last year. Mom, why aren't you answering? Most of those messages remained unopened, unanswered. Not because I didn't love my daughter, but because every visit turned into an exercise in endurance. The real problem was Reed, her husband. Tall, square-jawed, with pale blue eyes that never seemed to focus on me. Eyes that slid right through me, as though I were a shadow. He worked in insurance, strutted around like he was a king, and treated me like nothing more than his wife's elderly mother. Naomi never told him what I really did. Not that first night, and not in the years that followed. At first, it had been my request to keep my work quiet. Later, it became habit. And by then, it was too late to change. To Reed, I was just a tired old woman with no real business in the world. That suited him just fine. I set down the empty glass and poured another, watching the last of the evening light fade into the dark outside. Darkness made remembering easier. Whitmore construction had begun with nothing but a second-hand truck and 4 men willing to work long hours for fair wages. Henry earned his living at the steel mill, while I dared to dream of something bigger. Back then, women in construction were as rare as rain in August, especially in a small town like Connellsville. But I was stubborn. Our first job was renovating the town library, then expanding the elementary school, then small private homes. By the time Naomi was born, the business was growing faster than anyone predicted. I didn't take maternity leave. I hired a nanny and was back in the office 3 weeks later. By the time Naomi turned 6, Whitmore Construction was building shopping centers across the county. Henry was proud. He called me the boss, and he meant it. His friends admired him for not being threatened, for standing beside a woman who carried her own weight and more. But Naomi grew up believing my work mattered more than she did. She wasn't entirely wrong. I wasn't the perfect mother. I missed plays, skipped conferences, and forgot birthdays in the middle of travel. But I gave her everything else: schools, tricks, opportunities, the very future she wanted. I hoped one day she would see it for what it was. Then she met Reed Holloway. The moment I shook his hand, I felt the wrongness in him. Too smooth. Too self-sure, that salesman's smile pasted on his lips. But Naomi was happy, glowing, blind with love. So I stayed quiet. At our first meeting, Reed asked me casually, "So, what do you do, Mrs. Whitmore?" I dodged with a half-smile. "A little of this, a little of that." Naomi quickly cut in, saying, "Mom's retired now. She helps out at the community center sometimes." The look of relief on Reed's face told me everything: no competition, no threat. Just an old woman. After their marriage, Naomi came around less. Reed's presence was a constant wall. He slipped in little remarks about my age, my clothes, my supposed outdated views. I became invisible in their house, the forgotten mother in the corner. Naomi never intervened. She just said, "He's only joking, Mom. You're too sensitive." Turned on the kitchen light and glanced at the refrigerator. A photograph hung crooked on the door. Naomi with Ella and Maddie, my granddaughters, 16 and 14 now. I only saw them a few times a year. To them, I was nothing more than the cliché grandmother cookies and sweaters, birthday checks in the mail. They didn't know that their grandmother still ran a construction empire worth tens of millions, that she was overseeing a hospital wing project, employing more than 500 people. The phone buzzed against the counter. A message from Naomi. "Mom, did you get the invitation? I really hope you'll come. Reed's organizing a barbecue in the garden." I could already see it: Reed in his apron, playing the charming host, his friends with their smug laughter, Naomi fluttering around trying to keep everyone happy, and me, the silent presence in the corner. Still, something stirred in me that night. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was just time. But I felt something different, a pulse of resolve. I typed slowly, deliberately. Thanks for the invitation. I'll be there. And, as the message sent, a strange current of excitement rushed through me. It was almost like preparing for battle. One I had been avoiding for too long. We're in your day. You can hardly give equal advice. I remained silent then, as I had always been silent. But maybe it was time to speak up. I looked at my hands, wrinkled, age-stained but still strong. Hands that had signed multi-million-dollar contracts. Hands that built half the significant buildings in this city. Why do you let him treat you like that? Henry asked me in my dreams. And I didn't know the answer. Maybe because of Naomi. Maybe because of the granddaughters. Or maybe I was just tired of fighting on all fronts. But something had changed. Maybe it was the fatigue of always pretending. Maybe it was the realization that at Miage there was no point in tolerating disrespect anymore. Or maybe I just decided it was time for Reed Holloway to find out who he was really dealing with. I picked up my phone and opened the messages from Naomi. What should I get you for your birthday? I wrote. The reply came almost immediately. Just come over, Mom. That will be enough. I smiled. Okay, Naomi, I'll come. And this time it would be different. The week before Naomi's birthday flew by in the usual work rush. I spent 3 days on construction. Site of the new wing of the hospital where there were problems with the foundations. Then there was a visit to City Hall to approve changes to the design of the historic building. And on Friday, a full-scale meeting with the heads of all my company's departments. Saturday morning was gloomy. Heavy lead and clouds hung over Connellsville, promising rain. I stood at my bedroom window wondering what to wear to the party. Normally, I didn't spend much time on such trivialities. A simple pantsuit was always my choice. But tonight, I wanted something different. In the depths of my closet, I found the navy blue dress I bought a year ago, but never wore. Strict but elegant. It emphasized my still slim figure. Henry always said blue was my color. The night before, Naomi texted, Mom, the party starts at 3. There's going to be a barbecue, so dress casual. Reed invited his co-workers and a couple friends. Hope you don't mind. Reed's co-workers. Great. More smug insurance agents who will look at me like I'm a museum piece. Grandma Naomi remarkably well preserved for her years. I set the dress aside and glanced at the clock. 9 in the morning. There were still 6 hours until deputy. But I decided to stop by the office. It was usually quiet there on a Saturday, and I could focus on my work without constant interruptions. Their drive from my house to Whitmore Construction's headquarters was 15 minutes. The company was housed in Amadon 5-story glass and concrete building, one of the first projects I'd done on my own. Henry joked that I'd built myself a real temple of business. Maybe he was right. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars, indicating that some employees, like me, preferred to work on the weekends. I recognized Vera's black sedan and next to it, an unremarkable grey Ford I hadn't seen before. Entering the building, I nodded to the guard and went up to the top floor where my office was located. In the hallway, I unexpectedly ran into Ashton Baxley, who was coming out of the conference room with a pile of blueprints. Mrs. Whitmore. He looked surprised, but quickly pulled himself together. I didn't expect to see you on a Saturday. I could say the same about you, Mr. Baxley, I replied, looking him over. He was dressed more casually today. Jeans, a simple shirt, his hair in the same neat ponytail. It just wanted to get a better look at the remodeling project, he explained, pointing to the blueprints. It's a 19,010 building, and there are usually a lot of surprises with those. I nodded. I liked his approach, the meticulousness and attention to detail. Did you find anything interesting? I asked. Yes, there are a few things. He perked up. If you have a minute, I could show you. We returned to the conference room where the blueprints were spread out on a large table. Baxley quickly and professionally pointed out several probable areas in the building's design, suggesting alternative solutions. This will save us time and money, he concluded, and it will preserve the historic look, which is important to Thessity. Council. I scrutinized his suggestions. They were reasonable and well thought out. Impressive, Mr. Baxley, I said finally. Have a formal presentation ready by Monday. I want all the department heads to see it. Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. He nodded. I'll do it. We left the conference room and I headed toward my office, but Baxley called out to me. Can I ask you a personal question? I stopped, raising an eyebrow. This kind of conversation starter didn't usually bode well. Why is the company called Whitmore Construction, and not Merle Whitmore Construction? Most founders like to see their full name on the sign. The question caught me off guard. No one had asked it in years. When I started in the 70s, it was hard for a woman contractor to get contracts, I answered after a pause. M. Whitmore on the paperwork didn't give away my gender, and many clients thought they were dealing with a man. Until they met me in person. Baxley nodded as if he'd expected that answer. And now it's different now, but the name's still feasome. I looked at him with mild interest. Most of the staff would never dare to ask such a question. It's our tradition now, I said, and a brand that everyone in the region knows. Why change what works? Reasonable, he agreed. Pardon my curiosity. I just admire what you've built. There was no falseness or flattery in his voice. Just a statement of fact from professional to professional. Thank you, Mr. Baxley, I replied. Have a good day and don't stay too long. It's Saturday. In my office, I immersed myself in the financial reports. An hour later, Vera came to see me, surprised, but not too surprised by my appearance on her day off. Anything urgent? She asked, putting a cup of freshly brewed coffee on the table. No, I just wanted to get the paperwork out of the way, I replied. I have my daughter's party tonight, so I don't have much time. Vera nodded. She was one of the few people who knew about my complicated relationship with my family. By the way, what do you think of the new manager about Baxley? I asked casually. He's smart, Vera answered without hesitation. And he doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who's afraid of women in management. I like it. I smiled. Vera's opinions were always straightforward and precise. That's why I appreciated her. He's a godsend for the remodeling project, she added, especially after the Peterson debacle. I cringed remembering that previous manager who'd had to be fired for incompetence. Peterson had been recommended by a city councillor, and hiring him had been more of a political decision than a professional one. A mistake I wasn't about to repeat. After Vera left, I worked with the paperwork for another hour, and then decided it was time to get ready for the party. On my way out, I saw Baxley again, now in the first-floor lobby. He was talking to one of the engineers, gesturing vigorously. Still here, Mr. Baxley? I asked as I passed him. I was just leaving, he replied with a slight smile. Just discussing some technical details. Have a good day, Mrs. Whitmore. On the way home, I thought about my new employee. There was something refreshing about his approach. Professionalism without fawning, respect without fear. After so many years of running a large company, I had learned to distinguish between people who feared me and those who truly respected me. At home, I spent more time in front of the mirror than usual. That blue dress fit perfectly. I gathered my grey hair into a simple but elegant bun and applied light makeup. The mirror reflected a woman many in the Connellsville business world knew as a tough negotiator and uncompromising genetic. But to my daughter's family, I was just Naomi's old-fashioned mum. Taking a gift for my daughter, a dainty silver bracelet I'd bought at a local jewelry store. I left the house. It was a 20-minute car ride to Naomi's house. On the way, I thought back to our previous encounters with Reed. The memory of last year's Thanksgiving was especially vivid. We were sitting around the table. Naomi, Reed, their daughters, Ella and Maddie, me, and a few other family friends. Reed, as usual, was dominating the conversation, talking about his success in the insurance business. And then the client says, "Mr. Holloway, you saved my business." He concluded with another story of his professional heroism. Everyone smiled politely. I ate me turkey in silence, trying not to meet my son-in-law's eyes. "What did you do before you retired, Mrs. Whitmore?" One of the guests, an older man who was a friend of Reed's, suddenly asked. Before I could answer, Reed intervened. "Oh, Merle led a very quiet life, didn't she, Mom?" He always called me Mom with a subtle sneer. An old-school housewife. In her day, women knew their place. I felt Naomi tense up. She threw a warning glance at her husband, but he didn't notice. Actually, I was working. I started at the community center. Reed interrupted quickly. "That's very commendable, by the way. Volunteering is a great thing for the elderly. Makes them feel useful." Naomi coughed awkwardly. "Mommy was always very active, weren't you girls?" Ella and Maddie nodded uncertainly, obviously not sure what she meant. "I remember when I was a little girl," Naomi continued with a nervous smile. "She was always busy." "More important things than family, huh?" Reed said with a slight sarcasm, as he put a piece of turkey in his mouth. I didn't say anything then, like I always did, but I saw Naomi clench her napkin in her fist under the table. After dinner, when the guests had dispersed to the living room, Naomi found me in the kitchen. "I'm sorry about Reed," she said quietly. "He can be abrupt." "It's okay," I replied mechanically. "I'm used to it." "Maybe if you told him the truth," Naomi began. But I shook my head. Why? To make him feel inferior. I knew my son-in-law too well. "You chose him, Naomi, and I respect that choice. But don't ask me to complicate your relationship. But it's not fair to you." My daughter objected. "He thinks you're—" "It doesn't matter what he thinks," I said. "What matters is that you're happy, or you're not happy." Naomi looked away. "Of course I am. Reed and I have a beautiful family. I didn't push it. But in that moment, something told me that their perfect marriage wasn't as smooth as my daughter wanted it to be." I snapped out of my reverie and found myself pulling up to Naomi's house, a 2-story colonial-y mansion in an upscale neighborhood in Connellsville. White columns, manicured lawn, 3-car garage. Reed liked to impress. There were several cars already parked in the driveway. I parked behind a black BMW and sat in the car for a few minutes, gathering my wits. Just another party, I told myself. It's only a few hours. You'll get through it. But deep down, I knew something would change tonight. I was tired of being the quiet, inconspicuous mother-in-law. Tired of being ignored by Reed. Tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. Maybe it was time for Reed Holloway to find out who his mother-in-law really was. I got out of the car, smoothed my dress, and headed toward the house. There were voices and laughter coming from the backyard. Apparently, the guests had already gathered. In the garden, as I walked around the house, I saw a familiar scene. Reed at the grill in hisking of barbecue apron. Naomi fussing with drinks. The guests clustered on Thelon. My daughter saw me first and came rushing over. Mommy. She hugged me with genuine joy. You're here and you look amazing. Happy birthday, dear. I handed her a box with a bracelet. This is for you. Naomi opened the gift and exhaled in delight. It's beautiful. Thank you, Mom. Reed, noticing us, waved his grill spatula. Mom, finally. We thought you weren't coming. His tone was friendly, but I could see the usual condescension in his eyes. To him, I was always just an old woman of no use. If only he knew that many of the buildings in this city, including the office of his insurance company, were built by my firm, that my company's annual turnover is 10 times his annual income, that I'm a legend tall half the builders in Connellsville. But today I smiled and walked toward him, ready to play the harmless mother-in-law role one last time. Hello, Reed, I said as I approached the grill. I hope I'm not too late. We'll always make an exception for you, he said with the same smile that always made me cringe. Make yourself comfortable. Maybe you'll find some company among the other older guests. I nodded, keeping my smile intact, though everything was boiling inside. Patience, I said to myself. Just be patient. Looking around the garden, I noticed a few familiar faces, friends of Reed and Naomi's that I'd met at previous family gatherings. But there was one person among the guests I hadn't expected to see at all. Ashton Baxley stood at their drinks table, a glass of lemonade in his hand. I spent the first few minutes of the party watching the guests. Baxley, noticing me, nodded slightly, but didn't approach. I appreciated his restraint. Not every employee is able to behave properly when unexpectedly meeting their bosses outside of the workplace. Naomi introduced me to several guests I didn't know before. They were all polite, but their eyes showed the same condescension toward their friend's elderly mother. I was used to such looks outside my office. Mom, sit down. Naomi pointed to a wicker chair in the shade of a sprawling maple tree. I'll get you some lemonade. I'd rather have wine if that's okay, I said. I needed something stronger than lemonade to get me through the day. Naomi returned with a glass of white wine. I took a sip and let myself relax as much as possible. Their granddaughters, Ella and Maddie, ran up to say hello, and for a few minutes, wetticked about school and their hobbies. Then their attention was drawn to their peers, and I was alone again. Reed was shobbling over the grill, occasionally commenting loudly on the process to get the guests' attention. His friends, mostly similarly smug middle-aged men, gathered around discussing golf, stocks, and politics. A typical Saturday afternoon in the suburbs, I noticed Baxley again. He was chatting with one of the guests, a tall man with glasses. They looked familiar with each other. I wondered what my new project manager was doing at my daughter's birthday party. Connellsville was a small town, but still not so small that such coincidences were commonplace. Naomi came up to me periodically, checking to see if everything was okay. Her fidgeting gave away her nervousness. Ick knew that look. She wanted everything to go perfectly without conflict or tension. You're having a wonderful party, dear, I said, trying to reassure her. Everyone seems happy. Do they? She gave the garden a worried look. I think the music is too loud and the appetizers are running low. It's fine. I took her hand. Stop worrying. And enjoy your day. Naomi smiled weakly. Thank you, Mum. I'm so glad you came. We haven't seen each other much lately. A sadness flashed in her eyes that hurt me. Despite all our difficulties, she was my only daughter, and I loved her. Even if I didn't always know how to show it. I'm glad too, I said sincerely. And we should see each other more often. Maybe lunch next week, just you and me. Her face brightened. That would be wonderful. Our moment was interrupted by Reed's loud voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, the barbecue is ready. Everyone to the table, please." The guests began to gather around a large garden table covered with a white tablecloth. Reed proudly carried a tray of roast meat like a trophy. Naomi hurried to help with the rest of the dishes. I walked leisurely toward the table, holding my wine glass. When I approached, almost all the seats were already taken. Reed was at the head of the table with Naomi sitting next to him. There was an empty seat to her right, apparently for me. "There's Mum," Reed announced when he saw me. "We were thinking of starting without you." "I wasn't in any hurry," I replied calmly, walking over to the empty chair. When I was almost there, Reed suddenly stepped forward, pretending to help me sit down. Instead of pulling the chair over, he shoved it aside abruptly. Not expecting that, I lost my balance and fell to the grass, spilling the wine on my blue dress. There was silence for a moment. Then Reed laughed loudly. "You belong on the floor." His laughter, like a signal, caused several of the guests, mostly his friends, to burst into laughter. Some laughed out of politeness, not realizing what was going on. Some looked embarrassed. Naomi froze with a look of horror on her face. I felt the color flood my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger. For all the years of condescension, for all the snide comments, for all the disdain, this was the last straw. "Reed." Naomi jumped up from her seat. "How could you? Come on, honey," he said, still chuckling. "It's just a joke. Mom gets jokes, don't you, Mom?" I started to get up, trying to keep my dignity. Suddenly, Ashton Baxley was beside me, holding out his hand. "Let me help you," he said quietly, but firmly. I accepted his help, more out of gratitude for his intervention than out of any real need. Rising to my feet, I shook off my dress, though the blue wine stain had already spread on the fabric. "Thank you, Mr. Baxley," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. Reed, still smiling, looked at us with a puzzled expression. "You two know each other?" Before I could answer, Baxley turned to Reed with an expression of cold surprise. "Boss, is that you?" He turned to me, ignoring Reed's question. "I didn't expect to see you here." The silence that followed his words was absolute. All eyes turned to me, then to Baxley, then back to me. Reed stood there with his mouth open. All self-confidence evaporated from his face. "Boss," he repeated incredulously. "What's he talking about?" I straightened, feeling the weight of years of pretense fall away. "Minus Mr. Baxley is the new project manager at my company," I answered calmly. "Whitmore Construction. You may have heard of it. We build half the buildings in this town." Naomi covered her face with her hands. She knew this moment would come someday, though she probably envisioned it differently. Reed shifted his gaze from me to Baxley and back again, as if trying to make sense of the information. You own Whitmore Construction," Hefnerly said. "That construction company?" "I don't just own it, Reed," I answered, looking him straight in the eye. "I built it from the ground up, and he've been running it for the last 40 years. There was a whisper among the guests. Whitmore Construction was a big name in town. The company that built the new mall, renovated the historic district, built municipal buildings. "But you said you were retired," Reed continued, still in disbelief. "That you were helping out at the community center." "No, Reed." I shook my head. "That's what you said. I just didn't correct you." Naomi finally looked up and he saw a mixture of emotions in her eyes. Relief, shame, worry. "Mom was never tired," she said quietly. "She was always working. It's just we didn't talk about it." Reed turned to his wife, his face contorted with anger and humiliation. "Did you know?" Naomi nodded, unable to say a word. All this time, Reed slumped in his chair as if his legs wouldn't hold him up. All these years, I felt a rush of strength I hadn't felt in a long time. Years of silence, years of pretending were behind me. No more playing the harmless old lady role to preserve someone else's fragile ego. Yes, Reed, I said, looking down at him. All these years you've been mocking the woman who built the building that houses your insurance company's office. What pays the taxes that support the economy of this town? Who provides jobs for hundreds of people? Baxley stood next to me, keeping his expression neutral, but he could see the respect in his eyes. I don't understand, one of Reed's friends interjected. A grey-haired man with a face red from drinking. If you own Whitmore Construction, why? Did you hide it? It's prestigious. I looked back at him. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't advertise it in certain circles. I emphasized the last word, making it clear that I was referring to those circles. Everyone in the business world of Connellsville knows who I am. That's true. The other guest, whom I was seeing for the first time, confirmed abruptly. Merle Whitmore is a legend in the region's construction industry. I work for the city's Department of Architecture, and your company has always been a benchmark of quality for us. The guests began to murmur. Some looked at me with renewed interest, others with obvious respect. But what interested me most was my family's reaction. Naomi looked lost. Her carefully organized party had turned into a scene of exposure, and she didn't know how to react. Ella and Maddie, my granddaughters, stood wide-eyed, seeing their grandmother in a new light for the first time. But most impressive was Reed's face. Shock, disbelief, humiliation, all mixed together in the expression of a man whose world had just been turned upside down. A man who had looked down on me for years, unaware that my position in society, my influence, and my wealth were many times greater than his own. Why? He finally squeezed out. Why did you let me think you were just... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Just an old woman with no accomplishments. I finished for him. Because your opinion of me has never mattered to me, Reed. I don't live to impress my son-in-law. It was a harsh answer, but it reflected the truth. All these years, I'd let him think whatever wanted about me, because his opinion didn't affect my life, my company, my self-esteem. Baxley coughed quietly. I apologize for the intrusion, he said. I didn't know about your family relations. I was just surprised to see Mrs. Whitmore here. What are you doing there, Mr. Baxley? I asked, taking the moment to turn the conversation to our more neutral direction. I know Albert. He pointed to the tall man with glasses with whom he'd spoken earlier. We went to college together. He's a friend of Reed's and invited me to keep him company since I've recently moved to town and don't know many people. Albert nodded, confirming his words. From the look on his face, he was just as shocked as the others. Naomi finally pulled herself together. Shall we continue with lunch? She suggested in a shaky voice. The food is getting cold. It was an attempt to restore some semblance of normality to the party. But I knew the moment was gone. The atmosphere had changed irrevocably. I'm sorry, Naomi, I said, looking at my daughter. But I'd better go. My dress is ruined and I think everyone needs time to process the situation. No, Mom. Please stay. Tears came to her eyes. We can talk about this. I shook my head. Not today. It's your birthday and I don't want to ruin it. I turned to the guests. I apologize for the awkward situation. Enjoy the party and read, I added calmly. The next time you decide to play a prank on someone, remember you never know who's really in front of you. I turned to leave, but I was stopped by the voice of Ella, my oldest granddaughter. Grandma, is it true? You own that big construction company, the one that built the new mall. I turned around and saw something new in her eyes. respect and admiration that had never been there before. "Yes, dear," I answered with a slight smile. "It's true." "It's so cool," Maddie, the youngest, exclaimed. "Why didn't you tell us?" "You never asked," I answered simply. "I've always been just a grandma to you. But you're the real boss." Ella looked at me wide-eyed, like in those movies about strong women in business. I couldn't help smiling. "Well, I guess I am." Naomi came to me, still with a guilty look on her face. "Mum, I'm sorry for all of this. For Reed, for not telling the girls." "It's okay." I squeezed her hand lightly. "We'll talk later. Right now, take care of the guests." Reed finally got up from his chair. His face was stone-faced, an obvious attempt to hide a storm of emotion. "So, you've been mocking me all this time," he said quietly, but with a fury that was poorly concealed. "Letting me look like a fool." "No, Reed," I said firmly. "I was just letting you be you. The way you look is entirely your own doing." With those words, I turned and headed out of the garden. Baxley followed me, apparently having decided to leave the party as well. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said as we walked away from the house. "I apologize again for the awkwardness. I didn't realize my comment would provoke such a reaction." "Don't apologize, Mr. Baxley," I replied, feeling strangely relieved. Perhaps this should have happened a long time ago. He nodded understandingly. "If I may ask you a personal question, why did you hide your professional life from your daughter's family?" I thought for a moment. It was a question I had asked myself many times. Initially, it was to protect Reed's fragile ego. Then it became a habit. And then it was hard to change things without causing more problems. "I understand," he replied. "Family dynamics can be complicated." We reached my car. I stopped and turned to him. "Thanks for your help today, and let's make a deal. What happened at this party stays between us. At the office, we're just co-workers, just like before." "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore." Baxley nodded. "I'll see you Monday." As I got into the car, I let myself sit in silence for a few minutes, thinking about what had happened. The wine stain on my dress was starting to dry, leaving a dark trail like a symbol of what had happened today. An irreversible change, a mark that couldn't be erased. I didn't know what would happen next, how Naomi would react when the shock wore off, what Reed would do when confronted with the truth about my situation, how our family relation would change now that the cards were out. But for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. No longer did I have to pretend to hide my accomplishments to play the role of the harmless older woman. I could be myself, Merle Whitmore, founder and manager of a major construction company, a woman who had built her empire from the ground up. Starting the car, I took one last look at Naomi's house. Through the large living room windows, I could see the silhouettes of the guests, still discussing the sensational discovery. I saw Reed's tense figure standing apart from the others. I saw Naomi trying to save the party. The masks had been ripped off, and now everyone had to learn to live with the new reality, including me. I returned home with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I felt strangely relieved that the truth had finally come out. On the other hand, I realized that the consequences could be unpredictable. After all, so many years of pretense and innuendo don't go unnoticed. When I entered the house, the first thing I did was take off the ruined dress and soak it in cool water and salt, an old trick for getting out wine stains. Then I showered as if washing away not only the physical dirt, but also the weight of years of pretending. I changed into my house pants and a loose blouse and poured myself a whiskey. Not my usual wine, but something stronger for an evening like this. Henry always said there was no better cure for shocks than a good scotch. He was right about that. Their phone on the kitchen table vibrated with incoming messages. Naomi was trying to reach me. 6 missed calls and a dozen messages. "Mum, we need to talk. Please call me back. Reed is freaking out. The girls won't stop asking questions. I put the phone away. No talking today. Let everyone cool down and process what happened. Tomorrow would be another day, and we could talk more calmly. But fate had it differently. Around 9:00 p.m. the doorbell rang. A sharp, insistent ring. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Reed stood on the doorstep, his face contorted with anger, still wearing the same barbecue shirt, but no apron. His eyes were a mixture of rage and humiliation. "We need to talk," he said instead of greeting. "This isn't a good time, Reed," I said calmly. "Let's put it off until tomorrow when everyone's calmed down." "No." He stepped forward almost close to the doorway. "We'll talk now. You need to explain what the hell this is all about." I sighed. There was no avoiding a confrontation, no matter how much I wanted one. Stepping aside, I gestured for him to come in. "Okay, come in." Reed walked into the living room, looking around like he was seeing my house for the first time. Maybe he did see it differently, not as the humble home of a retired woman, but as the mansion of a successful businesswoman. "Would you like a drink?" I asked politely. "No," he said. "I want to know the truth. The whole truth. No tricks." I sat down in the chair, indicating the couch across from him. "Sit down, Reed. This could be a long conversation." He reluctantly complied, sitting down on the edge of the couch as if he were ready to jump up at any moment. So he began when the pause lengthened. "You own Whitmore Construction. All this time, while I thought you were a harmless old lady, you've been running a multi-million-dollar company." "Yes," I replied simply. "I started it 42 years ago, and I'm still running it today." And Naomi knew. His hands balled into fists. All that time. Of course, she grew up with it. It was the norm for her. A mother who ran a construction company. Then why? His voice shook with restrained anger. "Why didn't she ever tell me? Why did you both let me look like a complete idiot?" I took a sip of whiskey, mulling over the answer. It was a complicated question that had no simple answer. "It was originally my request," I said at last. "When you two first met, Naomi wanted to tell you about me, but I asked her not to." "Why?" He asked insistently, not to make fun of me. "No, Reed. To protect you," I continued, seeing his incredulous look. "I've seen a lot of men who couldn't handle the successful women in their lives. Men whose egos suffered by comparison. I didn't want it to affect your relationship with Naomi. Did you think I was that weak?" His face wreathed with humiliation. "That I couldn't accept a successful mother-in-law? I didn't know you then," I answered earnestly. "But your reaction the first time I met you confirmed my fears. You were so preoccupied with your status, so anxious to show your superiority. I decided it would be easier to leave it at that." Reed jumped up from the couch and started pacing the living room. "And then when you got to know me better, when Naomi and I got married and had kids, did you still think I couldn't handle the truth?" I set the glass down and looked him straight in the eye. "Have you given me any reason to think otherwise, Reed? Your attitude toward me has been condescending from the beginning. Old mom, grandma, endless jokes about my age, my uselessness. You created the image of a helpless old lady, and you believed it yourself." Reed stopped as if he'd run into an invisible. "I never," he began. But he stopped, apparently remembering all the times she'd been really mean to me. "You've never seen me as a person, Reed," I continued quietly. "To you, I was always just an appendage to Naomi, an inconvenient relative you had to put up with. You were never interested in my life, my interests, my past. You just created an image that was convenient for you and stuck to it." He sank back onto the couch, suddenly looking smaller and older. "But today," he said, looking down at the floor. "What You let happen today. You humiliated me in front of all my friends. No, Reed, I shook my head. You're the one who humiliated yourself and you pulled a chair out from under an elderly woman and mocked her. That was your choice. All I did was let the truth come out. He looked up and in his eyes I saw not only anger but fear. The fear of a man whose carefully constructed world is crumbling. Do you have any idea how people will look at me now? His voice trembled. A man who had spent years mocking one of the most powerful women in the city. Who didn't know his mother-in-law was a millionaire? I'm more concerned about how you're going to look at yourself, I replied. And what kind of example you're setting. For your daughters? At the mention of daughters, his face softened for a moment, but then turned hard again. Don't you dare tell me how to raise my children. He snapped, especially after all this. I'm not telling you, Reed. I'm just saying that your daughters saw how you treated their grandmother. What lesson did they learn from that? He was silent, avoiding my gaze. Do you know what Ella said to me? After you left, I continued. She said, I always felt there was something wrong with Daddy when he talked to you. It was a low blow, and I knew it. But today I wasn't going to spare his feelings. For too long I'd been silent. For too long I'd put up with his disdain. Reed jumped up, his face contorted with rage. You have no right. You have no right to turn my children against me. I didn't do anything, Reed, I replied calmly. They're old enough to see and draw their own conclusions. He walked to the window, turning away from me. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched into fists. What are you going to do now? He asked quietly. Use your influence against me? Ruin my career? I sighed. This was it. Fear of my power, of what I could do with his life now that he knew who I was. I've never used my position to settle a personal score, Reed, I said. And I'm not about to start now. My company has nothing to do with your career. Hettoned, and I could see the distrust in his eyes. Then what's this all about? He spread his arms wide. Why reveal the truth now, just like this? I wasn't planning on exposing myself today. I answered honestly. It's just that everything came together. Your prank with the chair. The presence of my co-worker. But you know, I'm glad it happened. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of playing the part of the insignificant old lady to maintain some semblance of marital harmony. We stopped talking. Reed sat back on the couch, massaging his temples, as if he had a migraine. Does Naomi know you're here? I asked after a long pause. No, he answered shortly. I said I needed to go for a drive to get some air. You should go back to her, I said. It's her birthday today, and I'm sure the celebration has been spoiled enough already. He looked at me bitterly. Do you really care about her feelings after all this? She's my daughter, Reed. Of course I care about her. Always have. Even if I didn't always show it the way she wanted me to. He shook his head. Yao destroyed our family today. Do you realize that? I straightened up in my chair, feeling the anger rising inside. No, Reed. If your family is destroyed because the truth came out, then it was built on a lie. And blame yourself for that. Not me. He stood up, looking at me with unconcealed hatred. You've always been an arrogant, haven't you? You've just been good at hiding it. And you've always been an insecure person who boosts his own self-esteem by belittling others. I countered. I didn't hide it at all. We stared at each other across the room. Two opponents in a battle that had been going on for years, but was only now coming to the surface. I'm leaving, he said at last. But it's not over, Mo. Don't think it's going to end so easily. I never take the easy way out. Reed, I replied, rising from my chair. And I'm not afraid of complications. He headed for the exit but stopped at the door. You know what the funny thing is? I really respect you at first. I thought you were a humble woman who lived a simple but decent life. Turns out you were just playing games with me the whole time. I was never playing with you, Reed, I say tiredly. I just didn't show you all the facets of my life, because you were never interested in them. He shook his head and walked out, slamming the door. I returned to my chair and finished my whiskey. My hands were trembling slightly from tension, from adrenaline, from the realization that bridges had been burned. My confrontation with Reed was inevitable, but I hadn't expected it to be so exhausting. Not an hour later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Naomi, pale with tear-stained eyes. She looked exhausted. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. I hugged her silently and led her inside. She sat down on the some couch where her husband had sat the other day, and sat silent for a long time, fiddling with the sleeve of her blouse. "Was Reed here?" she asked at last. "Yes, I didn't hold back. He left about half an hour ago." "He's furious," she said, looking down at the floor. "I've never seen him like this." "He feels cheated," I replied. "It's understandable." Naomi looked up. "What about me?" "I feel betrayed too, Mom. All these years you've asked me to hide the truth, to pretend that you're just an ordinary pensioner. I lied to my husband, to my children. For what?" I sighed and sat down next to her. "I thought I was doing what was best for everyone. For you. For your family. I didn't want my status, my job to cause problems." "That they did," Naomi said bitterly. "Only on an even bigger scale, if Reed had known from the beginning." "What would have changed?" Interrupted. "Do you really think he would have accepted it? That his attitude toward me would have been different?" She was silent for a moment, thinking about what I'd said. "I don't know," she finally admitted, "but at least it would have been honest. There wouldn't have been this explosion." We sat in silence for a while. It was starting to rain outside the window, the quiet whispering of drops on the roof providing a strangely peaceful backdrop to our tense conversation. The girls very excited. Naomi said suddenly, "Especially Ella. She's always been fascinated by architecture, and now she found out that her grandmother had built half the city." I smiled weakly. "I would show her the office, the projects, if she's really interested. She'd like that." Naomi nodded. "I think you two could bond on that basis. What about you?" I asked, looking at my daughter. "Are you mad at me?" Naomi stared out the window for a long time, watching the rain. "I don't know how I feel, Mom," she said finally. "Part of me understands your motives. Another part of me angry that you made me complicit in this deception. And another part of me just wants things to go back to normal, whatever that normal is. But that's not going to happen," I said softly. "We can't go back." "I know," she sighed. "Reed will never forgive this. Not to me, not to you. He's a grown man." I said he's going to have to find a way to live with it. Naomi looked at me with sudden bitterness. "That's easy for you to say. You'll go back to your company, to your life, and I'll have to deal with the consequences. Reed, the kids, the shattered family world." I felt a pang of guilt. She was right. My decision to keep a secret and then let it come out like that had affected her life more than mine. "I never meant to hurt you," I said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt your family, but you did," she replied, standing up. "Maybe not intentionally, but you did. And now we all have to live with it." I got up too. "What can I do? What can I do to help?" Naomi shook her head. "Nothing, Mom. Just give us time. I need to go home, talk to Reed, explain myself to the girls." "He came home?" I asked worriedly. "I don't know," she shrugged. "He's not answering his cell phone. But where else would he go?" I walked her to the door. Before she left, she turned and looked at me with a long look, You know what the saddest part is? All these years I've been proud of you, of your accomplishments. But I couldn't show that pride. I couldn't tell my children what an amazing grandmother we have. Now you can, I said with a sad smile. Yes, she nodded. But at what cost? She walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, staring after her. The rain intensified, and I watched her run to the car with her head down. Back in the living room, I poured myself another whiskey and sat by the window watching the rain. A day that had started out as a normal Saturday afternoon ended with the collapse of the family foundation I'd spent years maintaining unwillingly. The phone vibrated, a message from Baxley. Mrs. Whitmore, again. I apologize for today. If you need me to take Monday off, let me know. I smiled at his tactfulness. There's no need, Mr. Baxley. I'll see you at the office as usual, I replied. Despite the family drama, the world didn't stop. On Monday, I was to return to running the company, to projects, to meetings. Only now, without having to hide my professional life from my daughter's family. That something told me the family turmoil was just beginning. Reed wasn't the type to take humiliation lightly, especially public humiliation. And Naomi was caught between her husband and her mother. Not an easy choice for any woman. I put down my empty glass and walked over to the bookshelf of family photos. Naomi in her prom dress. Henry holding his newborn granddaughter, Ella. Naomi and I at the opening of a new shopping center. One of the few photos of us together in my professional environment. So much understatement. So many missed opportunities for real intimacy. Perhaps I've spent too many years building walls. Not just concrete walls, but emotional walls. Protecting myself, my company, my reputation. And in that process missed what was really important. A sincere, open relationship with my own daughter. The phone rang again. This time the number was an unfamiliar one. Mel Whitmore, I answered habitually. Grandma, it's Ella. The eldest granddaughter's voice sounded worried but determined. Ella, is anything wrong? Mommy's back. She and Daddy are fighting. She stopped talking. I just wanted to tell you that I think you're amazing. And no matter what Dad says, I'm proud of you. I felt a lump come up in my throat. Thank you, honey, I said softly. It means a lot to me. Mom said you could show me your company, the projects. Is that true? Of course, I answered. Whenever you want. Cool. Her voice became more animated. I always wanted to be an architect, you know, but my dad said it wasn't a woman's profession. I sighed. Typical Reed. That's Ella. Some of the best architects in the world are women. Ikno, she said enthusiastically. Zaha Hadid, my heroine, she said quietly, I have to go now. I just wanted you to know that I'm on your side. After my conversation with Ella, I felt strangely uplifted. Perhaps today's events, for all their drama, had opened the door to a new, more sincere relationship with my granddaughters. But at the same time, I realized that a rift had begun in Naomi's family. If the kids took my side, it would only exacerbate tension between them and Reed, and Naomi would be in an even more difficult position, torn between loyalty to her husband and protecting her children. I went to the window and pressed my palm against the cold glass. The rain had intensified into a downpour. Just the right weather for a day like this. A day when years of secrets came out, changing the landscape of our family forever. Today I am no longer just Naomi's Moma, Ella, and Matthew's grandmother. Today I am Mel Whitmore again, in the fullness of my personality with all the facets of my life. And as painful as that transition was, I couldn't regret it because living half-heartedly, hiding an important part of myself is no life at all. But the price was high, and E wasn't the only one paying it. Monday came with the inevitability of sunrise. I woke up earlier than usual, despite the restless night. The dreams had been disturbing. Fragments of conversations with Reed and Naomi, the faces of my granddaughters, the puzzled looks of the guests at the party. The events of Saturday night continued to haunt me even in my dreams. The morning routine helped me gather my thoughts. A shower, a cup of strong coffee, a familiar grey suit. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. Grey hair gathered in a neat bundle. Wrinkles that had grown deeper in recent years. A straight back and a determined look. Merle Whitmore, as she was known in the Connellsville business world, strong, unbending, uncompromising. I arrived at the office by 8 in the morning. Vera was already there, as always, with a binder of fresh documents and a list of issues that needed my attention. "Tough weekend?" she asked, noticing my tired look. "You could say that," I replied, taking the cup of coffee from her hands. "Family difficulties." Vera nodded, not asking too many questions. In 15 years of working together, she had learned to understand when I was ready to talk and when I preferred silence. "At 10:30, I have a meeting with the contractors for the hospital project," she said. "Getting down to business." At 1300, lunch with bank representatives about financing a new project in the Northern A-Board. And at 1600, a presentation by Baxley on fair innovation of the historic building. I looked at the schedule and nodded. "What about updating the list of insurance companies for the bid?" Vera placed another folder in front of me. "Here are the candidates that meet our criteria. 15 companies, including our current partner." I opened the folder and started looking through the list. The insurance company where Reed worked, Premier Insurance, was in the middle of the list. They had provided insurance coverage for several of our projects over the past 5 years, although they weren't our primary partner. "What about Premier Insurance?" I asked, pointing to the line with their name on it. "How are the numbers for the last year?" Vera checked her notes. "Stable, but without much growth. There are a couple of new companies with more attractive terms, especially Alliance Security. They offer extended coverage for the same price." It got me thinking. The decision to switch insurance companies was purely business, nothing to do with my personal relationship with Reed. At least that's what I told myself. But was I being completely honest? Had Saturday's confrontation affected my professional judgment? "Prepare a comparative analysis of the top 3 offers," I finally said, "including Premier Insurance and Alliance Security. I want to see all the numbers before making a decision." Vera nodded and made a note in her notebook. She had worked with me long enough to know that I never make hasty decisions, especially when it comes to company partners. The morning passed with the usual work rush. The meeting with the contractors was productive. We managed to solve a problem with the supply of materials for the hospital project. Lunch with bankers also went smoothly. They were impressed with our new project and were ready to provide financing on favorable terms. When I returned to the office after lunch, I found on my desk a comparative analysis of insurance companies prepared by Vera. The figures spoke for themselves. Alliance Security offered the best terms. Premier Insurance lagged behind in several key areas. I leaned back in my chair contemplating the situation. The rational business decision was obvious to change insurance partners. But in the context of recent events, it could look like a personal vendetta against Reed. And I never let personal relationships affect business. The phone on the desk rang. Vera said Ashton Baxley wanted to see me. "Send him in," I answered. Baxley entered with a folder of documents and a clipboard. "Mrs. Whitmore," he began after the greeting. "I wanted to discuss some details of the presentation before the general meeting." "Of course, Mr. Baxley." I pointed to the chair across from me. "Have a seat." He sat down and opened a folder of drawings. But instead of getting straight to the point, he hesitated for a moment. "May I say something personal first?" he asked with uncharacteristic uncertainty. I nodded, preparing myself for another apology for Saturday's incident. I found out that Reed Holloway, your son-in-law, works for Premier Insurance, he said, looking straight in the eye. And that this company is one of our insurance partners. That was unexpected. I raised an eyebrow. And how did you know that, Mr. Baxley? Albert, my friend from Thepity, mentioned it when he called yesterday. He answered honestly. Hayes concerned about the implications of the situation. I see. I leaned back in my chair. And what are your concerns in that regard? Baxley folded his hands on the table. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the connection in light of recent events. This could be a sensitive issue. I appreciated. Hiskender. Not many employees would be willing to have this conversation. I am aware of it, Mr. Baxley, I replied, pointing to the analysis in front of me. And I'm considering our insurance partners right now, purely from a business point of view. He nodded. I never doubted your professionalism, Mrs. Whitmore. I just thought it was appropriate to mention this information. I appreciate your honesty, I said. Now, let's get back to your presentation. Wes spent the next half hour discussing the details of the remodeling project. Baxley was well prepared. His proposals were thoughtful and innovative. I became more and more convinced that he was truly an asset to the company. After he left, I went back to analyzing insurance companies. I had to make a decision by the end of the week to have time to prepare the documentation for the new project. Vera came into the office with a cup of fresh coffee. You have a visitor? She said with an unusual hesitation in her voice. Naomi. I looked at my watch in surprise. It was almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Baxley's presentation was about to start. Show her in, I said, putting the papers aside. Naomi walked into the office looking unusually unsure. She'd never been to my office, preferring to meet me at home or in neutral places. Hi, Mom, she said, looking around. This is an impressive office. Thank you. I pointed to the visitor's chair. Have a seat. What brings you here? Naomi sat down, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. I need to talk to you about Reed, I sighed, expecting an atherbuke or plea for reconciliation. I'm listening. Did you know he works at Premier Insurance? She began. Of course I know, I replied. He's been there for 10 years. And you know that your company is one of their biggest clients, she continued. We're one of their many clients, I corrected. But not the biggest. Naomi stepped forward. Reed sees you're going to cancel your contract with Premier Insurance. Is that true? That's what it is. Reed had already started to act, trying to use Naomi as an intermediary. I'm considering it, I answered honestly. We have offers from other companies with better terms. But you realize what that looks like, don't you? There was desperation in her voice. After what happened on Saturday, everyone will think you're getting back at him. I folded my hands on the table. I'm not worried about what other people think, Naomi. I make decisions based on what's best for my company. Even if it hurts your own family. She raised her voice, which was uncharacteristic of her. Reed sees he could lose his job if you cancel the contract. His performance depends on these contracts. I felt irritation rising inside. So, all this time, Reed's been using our kinship to advance his career. No wonder Premier Insurance was so willing to work with us despite the less than favourable terms. If his career depends on one client, maybe Hessel'd rethink his strategy. I said more coldly than I intended. Naomi looked like I'd slapped her. How can you be so heartless? This is family, your own family. The family where your husband made a fool of me in front of all your friends. I reminded her. A family where he's treated me with contempt for years. And now he wants me to keep paying his company just because he works there. Even if it's not in the best interest of my business, he apologized. Naomi exclaimed. He admitted he was wrong. That was news to me. When yesterday she lowered her voice a little, we had a long talk. He realized what he did was wrong. He needs time to get used to the idea that this mother-in-law is a powerful businesswoman. I looked at her skeptically, and he sent you to ask Mennett to break my contract with his company. Is this his way of apologizing? Naomi lowered her gaze. He didn't send me. I decided to come. But it was his idea, I clarified, knowing my daughter. She didn't answer, which was confirmation enough. Naomi, I softened my tone. I realize you're in a difficult position. But you have to understand business is business. I can't make decisions based on family ties. It's unprofessional and ultimately bad for the company. But you can make an exception, she insisted. Just this. Once, give Reed a chance to find other contracts to prepare. I shook my head. I haven't made a final decision yet, but if Premier Insurance wants to keep us as a client, they'll have to offer more competitive terms. This is a business, Naomi, not a personal relationship. She stood up, her face a look of bitterness and disappointment. It's always been more about business for you, hasn't it? Always. Even when I was a child, even now, your precious companionways comes first. Her words hurt me, but I didn't show it. My company provided you with an education, a home, all the privileges you had, I said calmly. It allowed me to be independent after your father died. Yes, I devoted a lot of time and energy to it, but I never put her above you. Then prove it, Naomi said defiantly. Keep your contract with Reed's company for me, for our family. I looked at my daughter, a grown woman, a mother of 2, and I saw the desperation of someone trying to save her world from destruction. But I also saw manipulation, perhaps unconscious manipulation, but manipulation. I'll think about it, I said. Finally. But I can't promise anything. She nodded, realizing that was the best she could do. Call me when you make a decision, she said, heading for the door. And Mum, please remember that it's not just the money at stake, it's our relationship. After she left, I sat still for a long time, staring at the stack of papers on my desk. Comparative analysis of insurance companies, cold numbers and facts against my daughter's emotional plea. Vera peeked into the office. Is everything all right? She asked anxiously. Yes, I replied, straightening. Just a family emergency. Baxley's presentation is in 10 minutes, right? She nodded. Everyone's already gathering in the conference room. I'll be right there, I said, gathering my papers. And Vera, please prepare a formal request to Premier Insurance. I want to know if they're willing to renegotiate their terms to match Alliance Securities' offer. Of course, she replied. I'll send it out today. Baxley's presentation was a success. His project to renovate the historic building was met with enthusiasm by all the department heads. Particularly impressed was his solution to the problem of preserving the historic facade while modernizing the interior spaces. After the meeting, when everyone was about to disperse, Baxley lingered. Mrs. Whitmore, he said when we were alone in the conference room. May I ask a question? Of course, I answered, gathering my notes. I saw your daughter leave today, he began cautiously, and I couldn't help but notice that she looked upset. I hope my interference on Saturday didn't create irreparable problems in your family. I looked at him with mild surprise. It's not every day a co-worker shows such personnel involvement. The problems existed long before you showed up, Mr. Baxley, I replied. You were just the catalyst for something that was long overdue. And don't blame yourself. It would have happened sooner or later. He nodded, but there was still concern in his eyes. If there's anything I can do to help, he began. Thank you, but that's something I'll have to figure out on my own. I organized the papers into a folder. Great presentation, by the way. The project is approved. You can start preparations next week. Back in my office, I found a new message from Naomi. Reed wants to meet with you in person tomorrow at the Oak Garden restaurant at 1 o'clock. Please come. I wondered. Meeting with Reed after everything that had happened could be tense. That maybe it was a chance to solve the situation without further escalating the conflict. Okay, I'll better, I replied. The next day at exactly 1 o'clock, I walked into the Oak Garden, one of Connellsville's most expensive restaurants. An interesting choice of venue. Reed was clearly trying to impress, or perhaps he felt more confident on his turf. This restaurant was a favorite lunch spot for insurance agents' business lunches. The Mottery escorted me to a table in the far corner of the room, where Reed was already seated. He stood up when I arrived. A rare gesture of courtesy on his part. Merle, he said, extending his hand. Thanks for coming. I shook his hand and sat down. Across from him. He looked tense, but he tried to look confident. Naomi said you wanted to talk. I started, declining the menu and ordering only water. I'm listening. Reed took a sip of wine from his glass before he spoke. I wanted to apologize for my behavior for all these years and especially for Saturday's incident. It was unforgivable. I looked at him carefully, trying to determine how sincere his words were. Go on, I said neutrally. I was shocked to learn the truth about you, about your company, I continued. It turned my whole view of our family dynamic upside down, but that's no excuse for my behavior. I was wrong, and I apologize. I nodded, accepting his apology, but taking my time to respond. Naomi said you were in office yesterday. He continued when he realized I wasn't going to talk, and that you were discussing a contract with Premier Insurance. That was it. The real reason for the meeting. Yes, I confirmed. We're reviewing our insurance partner's normal business practice. Of course, he tried to smile, but it didn't come out convincingly. I understand business is business, but I was thinking maybe we could find a solution that works for everyone. I'm listening, I said, sipping my water. Reed leaned forward. I've spoken to the management of Premier Insurance. They're willing to offer you special terms, better than any of their competitors. I'll personnel reverse all your projects making sure the paperwork and payments are processed as quickly as possible. Special terms? I raised an eyebrow. You're offering me preferential treatment. That's not exactly legal, Reed. He shook his head hastily. No, it's within the law. It's just a more personalized approach, like for a high-value client. I stared at him, suddenly realizing that what I was looking at was not just an arrogant son-in-law, but a desperate man who would do anything to keep his job under status. And what do you get out of it? I asked him bluntly. He hesitated. Well, I'll be in charge of the new department of large clients. That's a promotion. I see. I leaned back in my chair. You're using your kinship with me to advance your career. Not like that, he objected. It's a mutually beneficial partnership. You get better insurance terms. I get a chancetto prove my value to the company. And if I refuse, I asked, even though I already knew the answer. His face tensed. Look, Mal, I'm trying to find a compromise for my family, for Naomi, and the girls. Do you really want me to lose my job? For your own daughter and granddaughters to suffer? That's it. Manipulation, pure and simple. Using family as leverage. I don't think losing one client is going to get you fired. Reed, I said calmly. Unless you're exaggerating your problems to put pressure on me. He clenched his fists on the table. You don't understand. My numbers aren't the best anymore. The last quarter was difficult. If I lose my contract with Whitmore Construction, you'll have to find other clients. I finished for him, like any professional insurance agent does. Reed blushed angrily. You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Are you getting back at me for all these years? I looked at him with a long look. No, Reed. I'm just running a business. And I don't let personal relationships affect business decisions. Maybe you should learn to do the same. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his wine glass. You're going to regret this, Mal. I won't let you ruin my career and my family. I'm not ruining anything, Reed, I replied calmly. I just stopped playing by your rules. He tossed a few bills on Theatable to cover their bill and walked briskly out of the restaurant, leaving me alone at the table. I finished my water, reflecting on our conversation. Reed's threats didn't scare me. I'd faced worse in business, but I was worried about how it would affect Naomi and the girls. Reed was a vice lideret, and desperate people are capable of rash behavior. When I got back to the office, I called Vera. What's the response from Premier Insurance to our request? Nothing official yet, she replied. But their representative called and said they were preparing a special offer for us. I nodded. Good. When it comes, bring it home right away and prepare all the documents for the transition to Alliance Security in case Premier's offer does not suit us. Well, do. Vera paused. There's one more thing. Your granddaughter Ella called. She asked if she could come to the office on Thursday after school. I said I'd check with you. I smiled in spite of a hard day. Sure. Schedule her for 1600 hours. I'll show her the company. When Vera left, I opened my laptop and started looking at my calendar for the coming weeks. Meetings, site visits. The usual routine for the head of a large company. But now I had to make time for family matters, which suddenly became more complicated. Thursday was clear and warm. I was sitting in my office looking at quotes from insurance companies. Premier Insurance did provide new terms and conditions, much improved from the previous ones, but they still fall short of Alliance Security's offer. Reed had clearly overestimated his influence in the company. There was a knock on the door and Vera entered. Your granddaughter is here, she said with a smile. She looks just like you, especially the eyes. I smiled. Thank you. Show her in. Ella walked into the office, looking around with undisguised admiration. Tall for her 16 with dark hair and a high ponytail and lively brown eyes. She really looked like me when I was young. More than Naomi, who had inherited Henry's soft features. Grandma. Sharon up and hugged me. This is amazing. Your office is incredible. I hugged her back, feeling unexpected warmth. We'd never been particularly close, largely because I kept my distance, hiding my professional life. Glad you like it, I said, pulling away. Are you hungry? We can go down to the cafeteria before the tour. No, I want to see everything at once, she exclaimed. Enthusiastically, especially the design department. I understand that's where all the blueprints and plans are drawn up, right? We spent the next 2 hours touring the various departments of the company. Ella asked intelligent questions, listened attentively to the specialist's explanations, and even made some notes in her notebook. In the design department, she was particularly animated, looking at 3D models of current projects and drawings of future buildings. This is amazing, she said as we walked back to my office. I can't believe you built all this from scratch. It took a lot of time and effort, I replied as I poured us both tea. But yes, I'm proud of what I've built. Ella sat down in the chair, across from my desk, suddenly serious. Why didn't you ever tell us? Me and Maddie. We could have been proud of you all these years. I sighed, contemplating my answer. How do you explain to a 16-year-old girl the complicated family dynamics that led to years of pretending? It wasn't an easy decision, I began. At first, it weighs about the relationship with your father. Then it became a habit, and then it just seemed too late to make a change. Because of Dad's ego, she asked bluntly, surprising me with her insight. Because he couldn't handle the fact that you were more successful than him. I looked at my granddaughter carefully. Where did such thoughts come from? She shrugged her shoulders. I'm not blind, Grandma. I can see how he feels about strong women. The way he reacts when Mom voices her own opinion. The way he talked to Mo when I told him I wanted to be an architect, not a lawyer like he'd planned. It became heavy on my heart. I didn't realize that Reed's influence on the family was so deep that even the children felt his pressure. I wanted to protect your family, I said. Honestly, I didn't want to cause trouble between your parents. But maybe that was our mistake. I should have been more honest from the beginning. Ella shook her head. No. I understand. You did what you thought was right. It's a shame that it all came out that way. On the way home, Ella talked about her plans for architecture school. Her enthusiasm reminded me of myself when I was young. The same passion, the same drive to create something meaningful. As we pulled up to Naomi's house, I noticed Reed's car in the driveway. He rarely came home this early. Do you want to come in? Ella asked. Matty would be happy to see you. I hesitated. Meeting Reed after our last conversation could be tense. But on the other hand, it was impossible to avoid him indefinitely. Okay, I agreed. Not for long. When walked in, Naomi met us in the hallway. She looked tense, but she treated her smile. Mum, I didn't expect to see you. Ella, how was your day with Grandma? Terrific, Ella exclaimed. You don't know how cool her office building is and the projects. I saw a model of the new wing of the hospital. And it's incredible. Naomi nodded, but I could see her thoughts were far away. Reed's voice came from the living room. Who's there, honey? Ella's back, Naomi said, and Mom's with her. There was a pause, then the sound of footsteps. Reed appeared in the living room doorway, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked tired and tense. Mel, he said with a strained smile. What a surprise. I just brought Ella home. I replied neutrally. She spent the day in my office. Yeah, it heard. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Did you find yourself a new protégé? Ella tensed beside me, but I put my hand on her shoulder. Just showing my granddaughter my work, Reed. No big deal. Naomi stepped in, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. Ella, why don't you go find Maddie? She's in her room. Dinner was tense despite Naomi and Negel's attempts to keep the conversation going. Reed barely spoke, staring morosely at his plate. I tried to be polite when answering Matty's questions about the company and projects, but the atmosphere was heavy. After dinner, when the girls had gone to do their homework and Reed had retired to his office, Naomi and I stayed in the kitchen putting away the dishes. I'm sorry about Reed, she said quietly. He's going through a rough patch. I looked at my daughter, so much like her father in her gentleness and willingness to smooth things over. Naomi, you don't need to apologize for him. You're not responsible for his behavior. She sighed as she put the plates in the dishwasher. He wasn't always like this. He used to be attentive, caring. It's just that pressures of work, financial difficulties. It all changes people. Or it just shows them who they really are, I said, trying to speak softly. Apperson's true character doesn't come out when things are going well. But when they're facing difficulties, Naomi straightened a protective spark in her eyes. You've always been so critical of Theme from the beginning, even when he was trying to make things work. That's not true, Naomi, I countered. I gave him a chance, But his attitude toward me was always condescending. He only saw me as an old woman whose opinion was worthless. Because you never showed him the other side of you, she exclaimed. You hid your strength, your accomplishments. How could he treat you differently? I shook my head. Respect is not based on status or achievement, Naomi. It's based on recognizing the dignity of another person, regardless of their position. Reed didn't respect me, not because he didn't know I had company, but because I didn't think it was necessary. To respect an older woman, his wife's mother. Naomi looked away, but I could see tears in her eyes. I don't know what to do, Mom, she said quietly. Everything's falling apart. Reed says he could lose his job if you cancel your contract. The girls keep asking about you, about the company. I feel torn between all of you. I went over and hugged her, feeling her shudder with held back. So you don't have to choose, Naomi, I said softly. You can love us all, even if we don't get along. But you also have to think about yourself, about your happiness. Are you really happy in this marriage? She pulled away, wiping her eyes. Of course I am. We have a beautiful children, a nice house. That doesn't answer my question. I said material goods and even children are not the same as personal happiness in a relationship. Naomi stared out the window for a long time before answering. I don't know, Mom. I really don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing a role. The perfect wife. The perfect mother. But inside she stopped talking. You deserve more than that. I said, you're smart. You're beautiful. You're caring. You shouldn't settle for a relationship where you're not appreciated. Speaking from experience, she asked with a bitter smile. Was it different with Dad? I nodded. Your father never made me feel less because of my ambition. He was proud of my accomplishments, supported me even when others thought a woman shouldn't. Run a construction company. He was my partner in the fullest sense of the word. I miss him, Naomi said quietly. Sometimes I think everything went wrong after he died. You immersed yourself in work. I married the first man who offered stability. I've made a decision, I said, changing the subject about the insurance contract. Naomi tensed. And I'm cancelling the contract with Premier Insurance, I said bluntly. Their new offer isn't competitive, but I've negotiated a smooth transition with Alliance Security that will take 3 months. In that time, Reed can find new clients if he really wants to keep his position. Naomi nodded, accepting the information. I understand, it's fair. This is business, Naomi, I said. It's not personal. If Premier offer had been better, I would have chosen them despite my relationship with Reed. But I can't make decisions based on family ties. That would be unprofessional. I know, she smiled weakly. And frankly, I respect you for that. Though Reed probably wouldn't understand. It's his choice, I said. So is what he's going to do next. I just hope you and the girls aren't hurt by his reaction. We both knew Reed wouldn't take this decision quietly, but I couldn't and wouldn't adjust my life to his fragile ego any longer. As I said goodbye to Naomi at the door, I hugged her tighter than usual. Remember, you can always count on me. No matter what happens, she nodded, and I saw understanding in her eyes. Shek knew what I meant. On the way home, I thought about the night before, about my conversations with Reed and Naomi. The events of the last few days had clarified a lot of things in my life, made me take a fresh look at relationships I'd taken for granted. For years, I'd let Reed treat me disrespectfully, pretending it didn't matter. I thought I was protecting my daughter's family. But really, I was just avoiding conflict. It was my choice not to put him in his place sooner, not to show my true strength. And in some ways, it was my own fault that the situation had gotten this far. But now that the masks were off, I wasn't going to play by anyone else's rules. I wasn't looking for revenge. That would be petty and undignified. But neither was I going to pretend that nothing had happened. To go back to my old pretense for the sake of preserving the appearance of marital harmony. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and went out onto the back porch. The night was quiet, starry. The oaks Henry had planted were black against the sky. Their mighty silhouettes, a reminder that some things stand the test of time. My phone vibrated, a message from Ella. "Thanks for today, Grandma. It was the best day I've had in a long time. When can I come to the office again?" I smiled, answering, "Whenever you want. The doors are always open to you." Then came the message, this time from Baxley. "Mrs. Whitmore, the board has approved the remodeling project. We start next week." I put the phone away, looking up at the stars. Life went on despite the family dramas. My company was thriving. New projects were waiting to be realized. Talented people like Baxley were contributing fresh ideas. And somewhere on the horizon was a new opportunity, a real relationship with my granddaughters, especially Ella, who reminded me so much of me when I was younger. As for Reed and Naomi, time will tell. Perhaps their marriage will survive the ordeal. Perhaps not. I no longer felt responsible for their relationship. I did what I could to support my daughter, but the final choice was hers. The only thing I was sure of was that I would no longer pretend to be someone I wasn't for the sake of someone else's comfort. I wouldn't tolerate disrespect for the sake of maintaining the appearance of a family relationship. I will not remain silent when I see injustice, even if it means conflict with loved ones. At 67, I finally learned the most important lesson of all. Respect cannot be begged or bought. It can only be earned or demanded. And sometimes demanding grasp for yourself is the greatest act of self-respect. Reconciliation with Reed? No. That's not going to happen. Some bridges are burned not to be rebuilt, but to move forward without looking back. And I was ready for this new path.